Hello and welcome to yet another story swap. It's great that we can continue to connect, as it seems to be like one step forward and two steps back. We never quite know, are we easing out of lockdown or is a second wave coming? But nevertheless, what keeps going on is that we have our a monthly opportunity to share our stories and to reconnect with old friends, and certainly tonight or today, wherever you are, with a lot of new people, because we have a lot of people today making their feast debut, which is really exciting and perhaps appropriate too, as our theme is mountain tales. This was chosen, I gather, by popular acclamation. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what mountain tales we have this evening. It's one thing that Singapore, for all its virtues, does not have. We do have Bukatima Hill, which is a whopping 168 meters, I think, above sea level. That is the highest we get to, 168 meters, which I think Dee's laughing. She thinks she could probably jump over that. So mountains is not something that is in the Singaporean experience, perhaps. So we're really looking forward to the perspective that you are going to give us this evening. And so it's my pleasure to begin by heading south to Australia and saying hi to Peter. Welcome.
Hi.
And thank you for joining us. Tell us, is storytelling what you would consider to be your full-time occupation?
Well, storytelling and singing, yes.
Okay.
That's how I make my miserable living. Yes. At the moment, I'm involved in a rather interesting Zoom drama project with an Indian Australian writer called Arjun Raina, and we've got a Zoom show happening in Mumbai in a few weeks. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's exciting and interesting and new and different. Yes.
Sure, and it's a challenge, isn't it? Trying to do drama. I did one with some kids in also in India, and it was really tough just to try and get people speaking to each other and getting the timing and getting everybody on screen and so on. So I wish you well with that.
Yes, but it's a wonderful thing because it's the ability to bring live theatre into and all the interactions of live entertainment. I think it's a new and wonderful thing in the world. I hope there's going to be a lot more of it.
Well, good. Well, I hope that's a great success. We look forward to hearing more about it. So
From the horse's
over to you, and please, let's have our first mountain tale.
Virtue is a funny bird who delicately leading through the thorny undergrowth of forests dark and savage. A few years ago, I had to spend some time with my feet up. I had just been on an adventure. I got on a plane and flew over to Europe and sang on the streets of the Netherlands and England and Ireland and told stories wherever I could. And every day I spoke to my wife. And the subject of our conversation was mainly our dog Keisha. Well, my dog Keisha. I took her for walks and looked after her. And she was very old and she had diabetes and she was blind. And I learnt that on the day that I left, she stood by the window and wept for hours. My son had to drag her away to feed her. She recovered her equanimity, but her condition deteriorated. She got worse and worse. And eventually I started thinking, maybe I should go home. It was going to be difficult financially. I didn't know if it'd make any difference. And really, I didn't want to. I hadn't got to Ireland yet, and that was the object of my journey, the home of my ancestors and of the music that I like to sing on the streets. And so I continued. And it was an enjoyable experience. I lost a lot of weight. It wasn't anything life-changing. But when I returned home, I returned to a grieving household. And my wife had had to make all the difficult decisions about when to put Keisha down. I went back to singing in the streets around central Victoria, but I wasn't singing very well. I wasn't feeling very good. I was putting on weight. At the time, I got involved with the Mahabharata project with the Victorian Storytellers Guild. And it was my job to write a couple of songs, one of which was Virtue is a Funny Bird. But I was particularly attracted by a story at the end of the Mahabharata. As I'm sure everyone here knows, the Mahabharata is a story about the Pandava brothers, 5 virtuous, decent men who lived through a terrible war and for many years afterwards ruled Hastinapura with compassion and justice. But despite their best efforts, at the end of their life, they felt the world turning sour. Birds of prey were everywhere, crows and ravens' song filled the air. Even their dear friend and teacher Krishna had departed, and his army split in two, and they started tearing each other to pieces. The brothers decided to start a journey in the high Himalayan mountains, looking for a path to heaven. But as they climbed the high mountain passes, small weaknesses in their characters started to appear. Draupadi, the wife of all 5 brothers, had a secret preference for Arjuna, the 3rd brother. And Arjuna himself was proud and boastful. And as these weaknesses were revealed, they would suddenly slip and fall into a crevice. And one by one, they all fell, all except Yudhishthira, the most scrupulously compassionate and decent of the brothers. He reached a high place, and the god Indra came down the chariot from heaven and said, Yudhishthira, you're more famous than some of the gods in heaven. How would you like a ride? And Yudhishthira was very grateful. He was very tired. And he said, what about this dog who's with me? He's been with me a long time. And Indra said, sorry, no dogs in heaven. And Yudhishthira said, but he's my dear friend, a faithful, true, loving friend. I can't possibly leave him. And Indra said, well, that's your choice, and flew back to heaven. Now, as it happened, the dog was an incarnation of the god Dharma, his father, who was testing him, and he passed the test, and he was off to heaven anyway. But that image of a dog unable to board a sky chariot came screaming down the centuries at me. Yudhishthira's dog was my dog, and we faced a rather similar choice. Yudhishthira chose one thing, I chose another. I was the moral midget in this story. But the similarity showed to me my own grief and my own guilt. And I was able to express these things to my family. And we had a little ceremony. My wife had saved the ashes, and we spread them in the backyard and out in the forest where Keisha loved to walk even when she was blind. And I went back to singing. I got a bit better. I felt better. Although I did have some trouble in the mountains. Well, a very high stepladder in the kitchen. It collapsed. underneath me, and I got some bad cuts. I had to have stitches in my foot. I thought there might be broken bones, and so I had to spend some time with my feet up, which was where I found the mental space to put together this story. Virtue is a funny bird. It runs between my feet and I cannot see it anywhere, but I hear its wings are flapping. It's taken to the sky where I cannot follow. So come and teach me, funny bird, how to kill my family, how to kill my family, which I'm sure you all know is an entirely different episode of the Mahabharata, that wonderful collection of stories of which I have grown very fond.
Well, thank you so much, Peter. Wow, what a great way to start. When you were singing, I wasn't thinking Irish. The voice to me was Ewan McCall. I love the folk singing. Yeah, it's like Rona, that rang a bell for you, didn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I love Ewan McCall. I think he's wonderful. He's one of my heroes. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, just very strong. Thank you. And it just there's something about the unaccompanied voice there that just really grabs you. And I love the way you pulled it all together. And it's funny, isn't it? I mean, we've been talking about blindness and the blind, and we've had quite recently an issue here where we have very few guide dogs here in Singapore. There's only 8 or 10 people, I think, and somebody went into a Subway restaurant and they refused to serve her. I mean, it's just extraordinary that we still have to fight and keep trying to raise people's awareness. And it happened also in UK too. I think rather the BBC did done a couple of stories about this quite recently as well. Thank you very much indeed, Peter. Wonderful story. And
Thank you.
I shall look for the the mountains of the stepladder. They're obviously one that should be on my Google map, definitely. Thank you. Thank you. So now, Ramya, there you are. Very good to see you again. Nice to be reconnected with you. It was great to see your performance, which was, of course, based on the Ramayana, not the Mahabharata, when we were in Bangalore last year for the festival. So, and the conference. So how are things with you? Are you managed to keep busy?
Yes, updating myself with catching up with everything happening online. Right. So I do miss being with people, being with children, but the best part is that it's the world is your stage now. It's just opened up globally, and so making the most out of it, enjoying telling stories.
I'm sure you are. Well, that's great. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. And why don't you please share with us your story?
Okay. All right. Good evening, everyone. And I'm Ramya Shridi, and I'm now going to take you to the beautiful land of Japan with a folk tale that I have chosen for you from there this evening. Many moons ago, in the edge of a thick bamboo forest, lived an old couple in the land of Japan. The old man was a woodcutter, a bamboo cutter, who would go to the forest every day, cut bamboo and bring it back home. And his wife would weave them deftly, and she would make baskets, vases, flutes from it. They would sell it in the market, and they lived a simple life. There was one thing that bothered the couple. They didn't have a child of their own. However, one day, something wondrous happened. When the old man was in the forest and he was cutting bamboo, there was a shining light. He went closer to it, and there he found a beautiful, a small baby girl in the hollow of the bamboo. It was radiant, and she was the size of his thumb. He picked her in his hand, and he rushed home. Oh, the couple was so happy. They decided to raise her as their own. She was so beautiful, so charming, that they named her Kagaya, the bamboo princess. She was wearing a beautiful red silk kimono. Well, from the next day onwards, whenever the old man went to the forest to cut bamboo, he would find nuggets of gold, silver, precious jewels. Soon they became very rich, and they were able to provide all the luxury in the world to their daughter. 3 months passed, and she grew up to being the most beautiful woman. She was so radiant that as soon as she entered the room, the entire room would just light up. Information of her beauty spread far and wide, and suitors from all over the world came to ask her hand in marriage. Well, the old couple never allowed anybody to meet or even see her. There were 5 noble men who were extremely adamant, and they waited there and they said, "We have to meet Kagaya. Why don't you convince your daughter to choose one of us to be her husband?" they said. The old man went to her daughter. They said, "These are 5 noble men. Why don't you choose them, one of them, to be your husband?" Well, Kagaya smiled at her father. She said, "I don't wish to marry right now. However, I am going to give them a task. Each of them a different task. Whoever succeeds in the task will be my husband." To that, she gave them 5 tasks. The first noble prince was supposed to get a stone begging bowl of the Buddha. The second, a jeweled branch from the island of Horai. The third, a robe made out of Chinese fire rat skin. The fourth was supposed to get a multicolored jewel from the neck of a dragon. The fifth, a cowrie shell born from a swallow. Well, the 5 men quickly set out in different directions to accomplish the task and win the hand of this beautiful bamboo princess. Soon they realized that this was such an uphill task. The first 3 princes decided to deceive the task. They got imitations of the items that she had asked. Soon enough, the princess found out that it was a hoax, and they had to just put their head in shame and return. The other 2 men realized they calculated the complexity of this task and just gave up the pursuit. Well, the beauty and intelligence of Kagaya reached the Emperor of Japan, who called upon the princess. Oh, just one sight of her, he fell in love with Kagaya. She also was charmed by the emperor. However, the princess refused his hand in marriage, but they continued to write letters to each other. Very soon, Kagaya was looking at the moon And she started to become very sad and depressed. Tears were rolling down from her eyes. And her parents, they could not see her, their daughter, so sorrowful. They went and spoke to her. They insisted on finding out the reason for her sorrow. To this she replied, well, time has come for me to tell you the truth. I don't belong to this land. I'm the daughter of the Moon King. I have been sent here on an earth for a punishment, as a punishment for a deed that I had done unknowingly. My time on this earth is drawing to a close, and the next full moon, my men will come and take me away. I feel sad to leave the people here, she said. Her parents were shattered. They said, we would never let you go. They even ran to the emperor to seek his help. The emperor promised to send his entire army out to ensure that nobody would take the princess away from them. Well, on the next full moon night, when the moon was at its peak and the entire garden was filled with emperor's army, a bright light appeared from the moon. The entire army was blinded by this bright light, and a chariot descended from the moon into Kagaya's garden. She wiped her tears. She embraced her parents, and she gave them an embroidered shawl and said, I am going to take care of you for the rest of your life. However, my time has come and I have to leave. She handed a scroll, a letter that was addressed to the emperor, along with an elixir of immortality. She requested her father to give it to the emperor, and soon she was draped with feathers, and then she just descended and disappeared into the night sky. The scroll and the elixir of immortality reached the emperor, who said, what use is this immortality for me when my princess is not there? At the frenzy of grief, he ordered his men to take the scroll along with the elixir and burn it in the summit of the highest mountain in the land. And his men did as if they were ordered. It is that mountain which got the name Fujiyama, the never dying. They say that even to this day, there is the scroll along with the elixir of immortality burning, and the fumes crawling up to the heaven, sending the message of love. Arigato gozaimasu. Thank you very much. That's the end of my story. Thank you.
Very nice. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. And another one, we start with a little music too, just to get into the story. I was concerned for a moment that we were just going to have an uphill task, but then you brought it to the mountain. Okay? I didn't know that story about Mount Fujiyama, so thank you very much indeed. Yes. Okay. Mine here. Beautiful. And it was very, very clear to all of us who were watching that you must have spent a lot of time, as you said, upgrading. We all admire your technical, I do anyway, your technical proficiency and how you were changing your backdrop and getting the slides. How were you doing that?
I just worked on the backdrops and got the images that would go with the story. I didn't want it to disturb the teller, of course, so I wanted it on one side. So I did a few trials where to place the image, and I wanted a painting kind of an image, not the real ones. And I had kept the virtual background running so that I don't disturb it too much. And this, with a click, it changes in that order.
Wow, very good. How to be able to do that? Okay. Usually it takes me a long time to get from one image to the next. So
Yes.
very impressed. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Thank you.
Lovely,
Thank
lovely.
you very much.
Well, we're going to stay in India, and we now delighted to welcome one of our newest members, and certainly the youngest. Vaibhav, hello and welcome. You obviously don't have a lot of homework tonight.
No, I don't. But I can always spare time for stories.
Oh, well, that's very good. Yeah. Being able to tell a good story is very useful when you go into school tomorrow. And if the teacher says, "Where is the maths homework?" then you can, of course, spin her a story. Okay. So good. So
Yes, sir.
what got you into storytelling? What got you into storytelling?
Sir, I started my storytelling endeavors back in class 7th. If I'm not mistaken, I must be about 12 at that point of time. And I remember my teacher who takes care of oration in my school, she showed me a video of story, and then I got very intrigued as to tell that story in a different manner. And from then on, I've been telling stories in my school. And I
Very
really
good.
loved that job. Mine.
Excellent. Well, please share with us your story.
Thank you. Sure. So the story that I'm going to tell is a folk tale from India, and it is very, very popular in South India. Now, it is very contradicting that in South India, where it is extremely hot, I'll be taking you to the North Mountains of India, that is the lower Shivaliks of the Himalayas. Once in the Shivaliks of Himalayas, when the monster of urbanization hadn't laid its hand, there was spread a beautiful, gracious, long, large carpet of green, lustrous grass. Stationed at every inch were big, fresh, green trees. There were lofty hills, green and brown. And at the back of them, there were lofty mountains, snow-capped, and the sun would hide behind them and look at the entire region down, filling it completely with radiance. There was a waterfall that stood elegantly, that stood graciously in that region, and in that region, the animals, they coexisted in harmony. In that same place, there was a fly who was buzzing, playing merrily and happily in the air, just like and she was singing as well. I am a fly, vahe vahe vahe. I am a fly, vahe vahe vahe. I am a. Hang on, she said. What is my name, I wonder? I really think I should go on a hunt of my name. And so the fly decided to go on a hunt of its name. And as she went, she sang, here I, in the fly's tone, here I come, in my hunt plane, here I come, here I come, in my main hunt, here I come. As the fly was flying, it came across a shepherd, an old shepherd, wearing a muffler, a cap, socks and gloves, carrying his stick, taming his sheep, as he said, hurr, 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 hurr. The fly came across that shepherd, and she said, the shepherd's name was Pompon Pabua, let me tell you. And the fly said, Pompon Pabua, do you know what my name is? Hurr. I don't know what your name is, my dear. Why don't you go and ask my sheep? They must be knowing your name. Well, all right, said the fly. And then the fly decided to go to the sheep. And as she went, she sang, here I come, in my main hunt, here I come. We're going to increase the pace a bit. Here I come, in my main hunt, here I come. Here I come, in my main hunt, here I come. The fly was flying and she came across that flock of sheep who were neighing. The fly, we don't know what your name is. Why don't you go and ask Bonzo? He's the Indian god. He must be knowing your name. Well, all right, said the fly. But listen, be very careful. There is a boy who has come in the region and he's a very nasty boy. He doesn't believe in harmony at all. Be careful, okay? Okay, all right, said the fly. You see, I have wings. I can fly and I'll go away. Nothing will happen to me. And then the fly again started flying. And as she went, she sang, here I come, in my main pants, here I come, here I come, in my main pants, here I come. The fly came across that Indian god, a big, massive body, black as coal, having two horns as it went. The fly said, do you know what my name is? I don't know what your name is. Why don't you go and ask Chinky the langur? Now, for those of you who don't know what a langur is a variety of monkey with a long tail and a black face. And he said, why don't you go to Chinky the langur? You must be knowing your name, I'm sure. But listen, be very careful. There is a nasty boy who has come in this region. He doesn't believe in harmony at all. Okay, okay, I'm right, said the fly. You see, I have wings. I can fly. I'll go away. Nothing will happen to me. And then the fly again started flying. And as she went, she sang, here I come, in my main pants, here I come. The fly came across that monkey Chinky, and he was playing with so much of gusto and enthusiasm, just like, and the fly said, Chinky, do you know what my name is? I don't know what your name is. Why don't you go and ask Bongo, the great bear, the black bear? He must be knowing your name. But listen, be very careful. There is a nasty boy who has come in the region. He doesn't believe in harmony at all. Be careful. Okay, all right, said the fly. And then the fly again started flying. And as she went, she sang, here I come, in my main pants, here I come. She encountered that big bear who was sleeping with a carefree attitude. The fly went to the bear's ears and she tickled a bit and she said, sheep is langur. Sheep is God, langur, bear. Do you know what my name is? Oh, the bear woke up with a start. Oh, I don't know what your name is. Why don't you go and ask someone? Someone else, he must be knowing you. And he dozed again. And then the fly, in despair and despondency, she flew. Here I come, in my name, and here I come. Who will tell me my name? I want to know my name. And then in the distance, the fly saw a boy sitting, having a cup of chai, that is tea, in his hand. You know, you see warm tea, hot tea, and cold weather. How beautiful. And he was drinking. The fly came near him and started buzzing. He was drinking. She was buzzing. The boy's temper started rising. He was still drinking. He kept his cup of tea. The fly was still buzzing. He eyeballed her. The fly was still buzzing. The fly was gone. There, finished. Met its doom. Now you see, my dear friends, the fly was stopped innumerable times by its friends on its way not to venture out too far, because there is some nasty boy, and let me tell you, that boy drinking tea was that same nasty fellow. So the fly was stopped many a times by its friends not to venture out too far, but she turned a deaf ear. She said, I have wings, I can fly, I have wings, I can fly. But ultimately she met her doom. So this is also I wish to tell from the story, that never ever turn a deaf ear to anybody's positive opinion. You never know when they might come handy. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I have to say, I admire your energy and confidence. And if only I had had a fraction of the confidence that you just displayed there when I was your age, I shudder to think what I would have become. Wonderful, wonderful, great. I'm sure that Vaibhav will be very grateful for any constructive feedback because he really is at the start of his journey. And think of him like the fly buzzing around, and we are the different animals who can give him some advice on the way. But please, nobody, because we don't have any mean people here in the feast, nobody is to swat him and send him out of the room, okay? So thank you very much indeed. A most enjoyable story. I love the way that you were trying to find the different voices and the singing. Yeah, very good. Well done. Good start. Good start. And I'm sure we will be hearing some more stories from you in the future. Thank you. So now I'm going to take you all the way over to the UK, where my good friend Rona has been waiting. Hi, Rona. Good to see you. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Yes. So
you
have a story for us.
I do, yes. I have something to share with you, which is mountains in one respect, but it's not what you might expect to hear. Basically,
oh no, from you, Rona, I had a funny feeling that it would not be what I expected. So yeah. Okay, go on.
Well, really, it's about sometimes the mountains that we have to climb when we are endeavouring to do something.
Yes.
And this is one such story of a monumentous task. During COVID-19, this particular hospital was like every other, bustling and busy, and sadly some people going in head first and then coming out feet first, and it was a very sad place to be at any time. But the nurses worked so hard to keep everybody's spirits up, and most of the patients tried to be that way. But in Ward 11A, there was no sense of peace. There was no serenity. There was just Duncan. Because Duncan was the most obnoxious, horrendous patient you could ever imagine. And he upset everybody with his constant grumbling and whining and shouting at the nurses and being abusive towards them and being abusive to his fellow patients. So much so that the only thing you ever heard in that ward was his voice. Everybody else was silenced. They were frightened to speak up in case they were verbally attacked by Duncan. He couldn't do much else. He was lying flat out on his bed. Yes, he was ill, very ill. And yes, he was in pain. But boy, did he let you know it. And the poor nurses, when they left his ward, their mood was so down that it was spreading to the other wards. It was just awful. And then one day, a gurney was wheeled in, and George was on that gurney, and he was desperately ill. And he was wheeled into the only corner left in the ward where there was room for a bed. And beside that bed, there was a small window. And he asked the nurse to prop him up so that he could look out of the window. And then he heard this noise, and it went on and on. Duncan, groaning, mumbling, and then shouting, and then being abusive to the nurses. And he put up with it for a couple of days. And then he said, Duncan, is it? Duncan. Yeah, that's my name. What's it to you? Well, I'm just asking. I like to know somebody's name when I speak to them. I just wondered, you're obviously in pain, and I'm sorry for that, you know. But I just thought maybe I could cheer you up a wee bit by telling you what I can see here. I've been coming to this hospital for a long time, and I'd never noticed any of these things. You know that big hedge out there? There's a park behind it. You can't see it when you're on foot, obviously, but because we're 15 feet up, or 15 floors up rather, you can see perfectly well. And there's a pond in that park. And there's something swimming on it. I think it must be ducks, because they look like they're brown. And they're moving quite fast. I think it must be ducks. And there's the most amazing gardens and flowers, and it's just lovely to look out and see it. It's not particularly sunny today, but it still looks beautiful. And there's mums with buggies. I've heard about this because my granddaughter does it. They're doing buggy fit. And it's incredible to watch. They're using the prams as their exercise bikes. And it's just fascinating. And so he went on, telling all these tales of what he could see out of the window. And then he said, you know what? One thing I've always wanted was to have a go in a red Ferrari. And guess what's parked out down there, across the road from the park? A red Ferrari. I had a toy one when I was just a little kid, and I used to put it in the crib with the figures, and my mother used to go mad. That's no place for a red Ferrari, she would say. The baby Jesus is going to be arriving there any day now. And she would tell me off every time I put it in. She'd take it out and I would put it back. I don't know what compelled me, but I had to think that my red Ferrari was getting looked after, and I thought that was the best place for it to be. And then he started to tell him about all the things that he could see, and somebody that he recognised, that he knew, had just walked past on the street below. And he started to tell a story about that person. Well, while this was going on, the ward fell silent. Even Duncan had nothing to say. He sat and listened, and he was enthralled. And this went on day after day for about 2 weeks. But George was getting weaker. And one day the nurse, Ellen, she passed him as she was leaving the ward. And she went over and she kissed his feet through the sheets. And he started giggling and he said, "What was that for?" She said, "You have transformed this place. You've worked a miracle here. Seriously, George, I don't know what we would have done without you. Listen," she said, "what can you hear?" And he's straining his ears and he said, "Nothing." She says, "Exactly. That was you that did that. This place is so peaceful now." Very sadly, just 3 days later, George died. And as the gurney was wheeled out of the ward, he started again, Duncan. But his voice wasn't raised. It was just in a normal tone. Nurse Ellen, do you think maybe I could get moved over there? Do you think my bed could go over there now? I'd like to see what George was looking at, and maybe I could share it with the other patients. Well, Ellen was gobsmacked. She went, "Oh, I don't know about that. I don't know if you've got what it takes." He said, I'll try. I want to try." And the porters came in and helped Ellen to push his bed over into the corner by that little window. And when he looked out, he went ballistic. The old Duncan was back for a few minutes. "Effing park, effing Ferrari, what the F is he talking about? There's no effing park there, there's nothing but an effing blank wall." And he went ballistic. "Hold on a minute," Ellen said. "Do you not know what happened to you?" He said, "No, I've got no idea. The man's bloody lunatic. I'm sorry, I shouldn't speak ill of the dead, but for God's sake, what kind of mind did he have?" And Ellen said, "An incredible one, because he was a storyteller." And he went, "A storyteller? Yeah, a storyteller. He made all that up. He made all of that up for you and the other patients in here to make you feel better. And guess what? It worked, didn't it, Duncan?" Yeah, it did." Do you think I could do that? Really? I mean, do you think I could? She said, I'll tell you what, I'd rather you tried than go back to your old ways. How about that then, Duncan? I'm going to do it, he said. I'm going to do it. And he did. And he struggled at first. He really struggled trying to picture in his mind, looking at a blank wall, what could he see? What could he tell them? But eventually he started to think back because Ellen said to him, think about what things were like when you were a wee boy. And that's exactly what he did. He mimicked almost to the T the Red Ferrari story. And the patients just absolutely loved it. And Ellen said, I'm really chuffed, but guess what? I'm no kissing your feet, not just yet.
Wonderful. Yeah. Very nice. Very nice. I love the way, I mean, I've told that story too, but I just love the way that you give it. That's the storyteller's focus. It was such a good story for us here. And the work that we try to do at this particular time. I think in some way, that's what we were thinking when we decided that we would move the story swaps from being once a quarter to being, monthly, because we need that therapy, don't we? We need that chance. So yeah, thank you. That's beautifully told. Thank you very much, Arona. And I will share, funnily enough, you say climbing the mountain. It was one of the the very first stories that I created back in the 1980s. I ran a deaf theater company, and I wrote a story for a wonderful mime actor, and it's precisely that. And although the story is about a literal mountain that he's climbing, obviously as a theatre piece, Peter, you will realize that it's working as a metaphorical piece. Back in the 1980s, Singapore was a very different country for people with disability. And there was certainly a lot of barriers that society put in their way. So thank you very much indeed, Rona. Lovely, lovely.
It was a joy. Thank you.
Good. So now we come back to India, and it's Lipika.
I'm in Bhubaneswar, capital of Odisha, in India.
Oh, very good, very good. And is storytelling what I might say is your, you spend most of your time doing?
Yeah, I do storytelling. Prior to that, I worked in the field of teaching, training and education for the last 20 years. I worked as a teacher's trainer, as well as a school administrator, and the different levels of teaching in the school education system. And along with that, I taught spoken English in many different institutes, aerospace training institutes, management colleges. So now I am into storytelling, and I'm in the process of making a library also in our farmhouse. It's 160 kilometers from Bhubaneswar, and so that the underprivileged children can get time and privilege to read books and tell stories.
Wow. What a great project. Well, we all wish you well with that. Okay.
Yeah, but it has stalled because of the pandemic. It has got stalled. Let's see what's happening after that.
Yeah. But at least you're keeping the stories alive. So the books may be gathering dust, but not the stories. So thank you. Over to you, please. We look forward to your tale.
Yes, namaskar to everyone. Hello, everyone. Well, my story today is like this. Well, many years ago, there was a beautiful and peaceful kingdom at the foothills of a huge mountain range. The land was blessed with a bountiful nature. Whatever they wanted for the livelihood, they got it from the nature around them, especially from the mountain. The mountain was like a family for them. The fauna and flora, the rich mineral resources of the mountain made the kingdom very rich. The river that flowed down from the mountain was always brimming with water, and the people of that land got all the benefits that they got from the river. And because of the mountain, there is good rain throughout the kingdom, and the farmers reap the nice harvest, and their barns are full, and nobody was hungry in that kingdom. And the king, who was not only a great warrior, he was a very wise and kind-hearted human being. So it so happened that this prosperity and the peacefulness of the kingdom, the stories about this spread far and wide. And a kingdom in the other side of the mountain, who was a greedy human being, the king of that kingdom was very greedy and was a warmonger. He always wanted to extend his kingdom by attacking or invading the small kingdoms around his kingdom and expanding his empire. So one day he thought, when he got about this, he became greedy. He thought, definitely I'm going to conquer that kingdom. I'm going to invade it and extend my empire to the other side of the mountain as well. Here the people of the peace-loving kingdom was always, they worshipped their mountain as if it is the family member. There is a belongingness between the mountain and the people of that particular kingdom. So the other side of the warmonger king then sent a huge army to fight this, to invade this kingdom, and the army went. They thought they will take the long distance, they will cross the mountain range and come back the other way and pose an attack to it. But when the army, the general, headed by a general, and lots of animals, the horses, elephants, and the big army, they marched for the war, because the other side of the mountain was not that friendly. It was not time of that year that it will become, the climate will change. It has become very hot. It was scorchingly hot. The path became very rough and coarse, and the pebbles, everything became very spiky, and the animals got bruised and they succumbed to their injuries. And this army of soldiers, they got tired. The water bodies had all parched up, and it was dry everywhere. They couldn't bear the heat, and finally they gave up. Then the general, looking at so many casualties, he decided to retreat, and he went back. When the army was approaching, the people of this peaceful kingdom approached the king, and they said, "Your Majesty, we got to see that an army is approaching us, and we do not know, they will attack us. Our kingdom is smaller than theirs." The king would say, "Don't worry, our mountain is there. Have faith on him." And having the trust on the king, they will all walk away and into their normal work. So when the general retreated back, the warrior king was so angry. He said, "Behead the king, behead the general." And it was done, because nobody would try ever to disobey him. So this went by, but he would not sit quietly. He sent for a second troop of army to conquer the kingdom. And then again a set of army was sent, but this time they thought that they will ascend the hill and then they will descend down and attack the kingdom. So they all started, there was a big army was made ready, and they all started towards the ascending the mountain. They put their ropes and everything, the equipment that is required to climb. But then the weather changed. It was not that time of the year that it will be cold, but it was become severely cold. There was a snowstorm, there were blizzards, and there was all the mountain got cladded with ice and everything. Then there was an avalanche, and the entire army was wiped out. So again, when the warmonger king heard about this, he was very much angry that how come this happening? He had sent his best men to it. This time again, when the army was coming, his ministers who tell the peaceful king that Your Majesty, an army is coming to us. He said, don't worry, have faith on the mountain. We have the mountain to take care of us. And then it will all be, everything will be all right. So the last time, warmonger king said, no, it's not going to happen. Now I have to go and see. I have to go and attack the kingdom. I want that kingdom for myself, for it is so very prosperous and so rich and abundant and everything. So now when he said, I will go through the passages in between the mountains, whatever narrow path is there, we will go through. So he, along with a big army, he just started walking there. And when they went, they have not gone that further, the mountain shook. The mountain shook, the land was all shivering, everything. The big boulders fell down, the rocks fell down, everything was in disarray, and everything got injured and attacked. And the king said, and he also got injured. Then he thought this will be the end of himself, so he went back to his palace, never to think of attacking this peaceful kingdom. And the people of this peaceful kingdom was very happy. The mountain has given them everything they had wanted for their livelihood, for everything. It was such a nice and prosperous kingdom, and they all sung to the glory of the mountain. And they sung this way, O Parbat, O Parbat, tu bada mahan, तू है हमारी अभिमान, इस पर हमको है बड़ा प्यार. Oh mountain, you are good, you are our servant. Glory to thee, glory, glory to thee, glory, glory to thee. That's the end of my story.
Thank you. What a wonderful idea, the mountain as the protector of the kingdom. Something that we take for granted, and yet it proves such a good friend for the people. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that story. I hadn't heard that one. Lovely. So now I would like to go as far west as we can today. And that is, we're going to Florida, where Jim is waiting for us. I hope you've had a chance to have some breakfast, Jim. Yeah, very good.
I'd like to share with you a story, and it's not a story about Florida. As I sit here, a dizzying 54 feet above sea level, but instead this story, which I call The Maiden in the Mountain House. There must be a way out of here, thought the slender, dark-skinned 15-year-old Katerina, an attractive Native American girl that belonged to the peaceful Oneida tribe, as she started to regain consciousness. And it was late November in 1830 in the mountainous region called the Adirondacks in the northeast part of the United States. And her bruised body throbbed with pain as she awakened on the muddy dirt floor where she'd been tossed by her captor, a ugly French trapper that they called Marcel Lebeau. In the pitch black cellar where Lebeau had thrown her had the overpowering stench of years of captives before her, and it reeked of sweat and urine and blood. Katerina, when she awoke, knew where she had been taken. It was a disreputable hole underneath a tavern known as the Mountain House, and the tribal elders had warned the members of the Oneida tribe to stay away from the place because it was a place where members of the tribe had been taken by the worst type of men of the day. They were murderers and robbers and other savage and unsavory characters like the French trapper Le Beau. And around the tribal campfires, the elders had told the stories that Katrina had heard of the men and the women of the tribe who had been stolen away from the tribal area and taken to this place never to be seen again, and where the orphan native children were sold on the black market by these savage men. And as she huddled, shivering on the cold earthen floor of the cellar, she could hear through the wooden floorboards above, Le Beau, not getting drunk on corn liquor, was bragging to his colleagues about how he had captured Katerina as he was out checking his traps that day. Finding her huddled in the snow, she was busy releasing into the wild a large white rabbit with tall brown spotted ears from its snare. And just as she had given the rabbit its freedom, Le Beau pounced on her, knocked her unconscious, and dragged her by her hair back down the mountainside to the cellar of the mountain house. Katerina waited until the men had gotten quiet, either passed out or found some other upstairs entertainment options, and then quietly began to move around, feeling her way in the dark and exploring the cellar walls with her hands, looking for a stone that she could loosen. And finding one, she worked it with her small, sinewy hands, back and forth, finally being able to extract it from the wall. And over the next several hours, she continued to work around that stone, finding others that she could loosen and remove, until she had enough stones removed that she saw the space small enough for her to pull her slender body to escape to the outside of the building. And as she looked around her, what she saw directly in front of the mountain house was a raging river with swift currents that nobody could possibly escape into and survive. And to the west, well, the west was the direction from which Le Beau had dragged her. And he knew that if she were to escape, that would be the likely place, because that's where he had his traps. And he knew that he could recapture her. He wasn't concerned about that, because to the east, well, nobody's going to escape to the east, because the savage Mohacan tribe lived there, and they didn't like the Oneida at all. So she was faced with three options, all three of which meant recapture or certain death. She had no other option except up the hill, the steep shale rock mountain behind her. And taking that option as her only survivable one, she began to crawl in her bare hands and feet up the side of the mountain. And as she did that, the sharp fragments of shale dug into her slender hands and her feet, causing them to bleed. And as the blood ran down her wrists and across her feet, she was having a difficult time with her footing, but she continued to crawl her way, inch by inch, foot by foot, up the side of the mountain, watchful at all times for the many dens where the venomous diamondback rattlesnake liked to make their home, and keeping her ear peeled below to any indication that the men had returned. And then she heard it. And as she looked down toward the disappearing roof line of the mountain house, the two men came out of the cellar, looking about, trying to find where the Indian maiden had escaped. And they could find no sign of her. And she pressed herself against the side of the mountain, hoping to be as still as she could possibly be. But in so doing, she kicked off a small pile of rocks that tumbled to the ground below. And the men, seeing the small avalanche at their feet, looked up and saw Katrina. And Katrina now started to panic, feeling extremely exposed and vulnerable as she saw LeBeau take his rifle, put it to his shoulder. The first shot rang out, and it landed 1 foot to the right of where it was she was standing, and a shower of shale fragments erupted. She couldn't take any chances on staying there, and she then leapt to a small stone ledge, only about 1 foot wide, and as she did that, the second shot rang out and landed in the exact spot where she had been standing on the edge of the cliff just a moment ago. Taking a deep breath, she waited, and then the third shot rang out, and the third shot missed her, but it hit the bottom of the stone shelf upon which she was standing, shattering it. At that moment in time, a special thing seemed to have happened, because as the rock ledge that she was standing on shattered and started to fall to the ground, it was an avalanche of loose rocks that descended upon the 2 men standing on the ground below. And they stepped back to keep from being hit by the descending torrent. And when they looked at the dust pile, expecting to see the body of this young Native American lady in the rubble, they saw none. But as they looked toward the summit, they saw a sight that stuck in their hearts and in their minds. For you see, as they peered up at the top of the mountain, they saw a large white rabbit with tall, brown-tinged ears that was leading Katerina up the narrow, rocky ledges toward the peak of the mountain. And her spirit animal had led Katerina to safety in the peak above. Thank you.
What a story. What a story. Thank you, Jim. Wow. So you started by, you gave us a very specific time and place. Is this a true story?
Parts of it are. As I like to tell my audiences, all of it is true and some of it actually happened.
Very good. Very nice. Very nice. Yeah, very, very, very vivid, and had me on the edge, if not a stone ledge, certainly on the edge of my seat. And particularly, I really like the way that you jump right into the story. It's unusual. I think, you know, a lot of the stories that we tell take a little while to kind of get going, but you are right in there. She's been knocked out, she's waking up, and she's there on the floor of the cellar, and the guys are up above. You know, you kind of threw us right into her situation. So thank you very much indeed for that one. Good.
Thank you.
And we have time for one more story, and we are returning to Bangalore again. Bangalore, a hive of activity. Meenu, are you there?
Yes, Roger, I'm there.
I can hear your voice. There you are, and now I can see you indeed. Good, good, good. Excellent, excellent. Well, listen, I'm really pleased that you decided to join us this evening, and I look forward to
my pleasure, my pleasure, yeah.
Good, over to you.
Thank you, Roger. Hello, everyone. Namaste, namaskara, vanakkam. Kale kauve, kale, himala, kale. काले कौवे आजा लगड़ बड़ा आजा काले कौवे खा खा उसे रोटी मांगे खा ए कौवे बड़ो मैं के देसु नाक गड़ो दे कौवे तलवार मैं के दूनो तू गरबार काले कौवे काले गुठी माला काले. And so goes the song, which you will definitely get to hear in the beautiful region called Kumon in the hilly state of Uttarakhand. During the month of January, that is Uttarayan, when the sun starts moving northward. While the rest of India celebrates this as Makar Sankranti, the people in Uttarakhand celebrate it in their own unique style. And that is by preparing sweet dishes and stringing it in the form of a necklace and then offering it to, you guess what? To the black crows. That's right. But that did make me a little curious. So here goes the story. So it was a very, very long time back, a really long time back, when there lived a king called Kalyan Chand, who belonged to the Chand dynasty. And this king ruled from his capital called Rajapur, which is now in Kumon, as I said again, in the state of Uttarakhand. Now this king, Kalyan Chand, was a very good king, a just ruler who took care of his people very well. The kingdom was prosperous, flourishing. The people loved and really respected their dear king. And they were all living very happily. But not the king himself. Well, you see, the king and the queen had been married for several years now, but they didn't have any children of their own. And this made both of them really, really sad and upset. And now, the prime minister of the king knew that because the king did not have any legal heirs to the kingdom, he knew this was his chance and he was eyeing for the top job. Meanwhile, the Rajaguru, or the chief teacher who belonged to the royal court, approached the king and suggested, why not the king and queen pray to the most powerful god in their kingdom, Lord Bhagnath? And so began their sincere prayers with complete dedication and devotion. And, of course, with divine blessings, in a year's time, the royal couple were blessed with a beautiful baby boy. Little prince, of course. The king and the queen were delighted. The entire kingdom rejoiced. They were so very happy for their king. And people from far, near and far were invited. Other kings, princes, princesses. And a grand feast was arranged to celebrate this. Well, of course, the little prince received a lot of gifts. But there was one gift, a pearl necklace, that was given by his own grandmother that he really loved. And this little prince was named Nirbhaya Chand, which means the fearless one. And he was fondly called Bhuguti. Now, Bhuguti, as I said, loved that pearl necklace. You know why? Because it had those little bells here and there, and they would go ting, tang, ting, tang, ting, tang, whenever the little fellow moved around. And that really attracted the little fellow, you see. And because of this, he would never ever remove that pearl necklace. He had it always around his neck, wherever he went, even when he had to take his shower. Now the clever mother that the queen was, she began to use this to discipline the little prince. And so whenever this Bhuguti troubled his mother, she would say, Bhuguti, no, don't you do that. Stop it. Otherwise, I'm going to take away that pearl necklace and throw it to that crow who's right there in the balcony. And one look at Kalia the crow, who was always perched in their balcony, and Bhuguti would stop his mischief. Oh yes. And this went on and on for several days. And over a period of time, you see, Bhuguti got over his fear for Kalia. In fact, even became good friends. Now, the prime minister, he saw the entire world crashing in front of him. How can he let this new fellow take over and crash his dreams? No, never. He cannot let that happen. And so he reached out to his supporters, and they all hatched an evil plan to kidnap Bhuguti, take him away or probably even kill him and snatch the kingdom from King Kalyan. Now, on the decided day, when Guguti was playing outside in the garden, the Prime Minister and his men went, took him, carried him, and secretly took him inside to the forest. Now, Guguti was already crying out loud. He was holding his pearl necklace and crying out so loud that that sound did attract Kalia, who was perched on top of the tree taking his rest. Immediately, Kalia identified the little prince. And he knew this was his moment that he had been waiting for 800 long years to regain what he had lost. And so he immediately called out to his crow friends, "Oh, oh, oh!" And all his crow friends gathered immediately. They together started attacking, pecking the men, scratching their faces, completely bruised and terrified by this attack. The Prime Minister and his men dropped the little baby and off they ran away without even looking back. Now Guguti was there under the tree, under the watchful eyes of all the other crows. Meanwhile, Kalia picked up the pearl necklace and flew towards the palace. Back in the palace, by now, the queen realized that her child was missing. She panicked. The king also panicked. Queen began to cry inconsolably. Just in time, Kalia reached there with the pearl necklace. He threw down the necklace. You see, the queen was so much in grief that she hardly noticed the pearl necklace, not even Kalia the crow. But for the smart queen's maid, who noticed this, and then queen ran to the balcony. She picked up the pearl necklace, and that is when she noticed Kalia crying here to there and there to there, back and forth. And she realized that Kalia was actually trying to tell her something. Immediately, the king and his men mounted on their horses, and off they went following Kalia. And he took them right into the forest to the same tree where Guguti was there, but sound asleep, still under the watchful eyes of all the crows. Oh, the king was so relieved. He ran, picked up his baby, ordering his men to go find out his enemies. He rushed back to the palace to the queen and handed over the child to her. Now the queen was delighted, of course, and she announced to everyone that today she was able to unite back with her child only because of the pearl necklace and the crow. And so she announced that she was going to arrange a grand feast with sweetened dishes made out of wheat flour and make it into a necklace, make her child wear it and offer it to the crows. Now, you see, it was not just the royal couple. All the people in the kingdom participated in this Thanksgiving. And whatever the Kalia's guru had told 800 years back, today came true. And Kalia and all the other crows, of course, regained their lost glory, and they were considered as wise birds. And not only that, but they would help in protecting the children from any evil. But what happened 8 years back, that's a story for another day. But for now, we know ever since that day, the people of Kumon still follow this. And in the month of Uttarayan, or that is the 14th of January, when the rest of India celebrate Makar Sankranti, these people get on to preparing those sweetened dishes, string it in the form of a necklace, get their children to wear it, and the children go out and call out their best friends as a sign of gratitude and a mark of faith that these crows would protect them from any evil. And so they sing the song. Kale kawa kale pala kale kale kawe aja sagad bada khata kale kawe kaka kuse roti magaika. Take this lentil ball and bless us with golden pitcher. Take this little sport and bless us with prosperity. Black crow, come, come, have this garland of goodwill.
Wow.
That's the story. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Yeah, what a great story. And it's always nice, isn't it, when a creature which is often perhaps much maligned in stories and represented as, you know, as the villain or the thief or something, gets to be the hero in a story. Can we just see if we can get the spotlight to, here we go. Great. So yeah, thank you very much. And it just reminded me, listening to that very clear folktale. Earlier we were talking with Senga Salka, who is going to be presenting our webinar next month on the 9th on researching stories, which I think is a really interesting topic. And she was saying that today in Hungary is Folktale Day. And so it's a really great day to be a storyteller in Hungary. But thank you very much for being with us today, Minu, and sharing that fabulous story. Thank you. Although I'm not actually sharing a full story, I would like just to take this opportunity to share a story that very definitely did involve a mountain. This was a story that I did for the Jacob Ballas Garden, and so we wanted to have stories that had a nature connection. And the story that I was working on is the mountain that loved a bird, and because it was quite a nice open space, this was in the pre-COVID days earlier this year, when I had about an audience of 70 or 80 people, and that I wanted to create a real mountain, which I did. And because in the story, so this is not a folktale, it's a made-up story, it's the relationship between not just one bird, obviously, because a bird has a very short lifespan when you compare it to a mountain, but over many generations, perhaps at least 100 years of in actual story time anyway. And so, as you can see here, this is the original, what the kids saw when the mountain was there. But then we were able to remove parts of the mountain. The mountain forms a relationship with the bird or its daughters. And it's very sad that it is left alone for 364 days of the year, and only when the bird is migrating does it actually stop off on the mountain. And so the mountain begins to cry, which forms the river. And then the bird, he's always asking the bird to try and come and stay on the mountain. And the bird says, but there are no trees here. How can I build a nest? How would I feed? There are no berries. And so the next year, the bird has seen the river, has seen the tears, and she comes with a seed. And so what I said to the kids was, well, I could spend the next 100 years telling the story to you, or we could like fast forward in time. And I invited the kids to come up and to take, I had these model trees. If you're into kind of like model railways and creating these kind of dioramas, these are very easy to get hold of. And I invited the kids then to stick them into the tree. I didn't get a video of me telling the story, but my good friend Sui Yen saw it, and at a library she told in Mandarin.
树种在后面，好乖哦。妹妹种在前面比较好。也可以。种树啊，想种哪里种哪里啊。种在你种好了，你们的树请坐下来。它不是个轻轻的。可是你种在水里，它没有泥土啊。它会有泥土。好了吗？ 种好了，他种好树的，请坐回去，谢谢。是一直流泪的时候，他没有看到有这些种子长大，然后变成树。突然间，他感觉到有昆虫在他的身上。快乐鸟，对，快乐鸟又来了。他绕了一圈。
Just an idea. The story is The Mountain That Loved the Bird. It's by Alice McLaren. It's a fabulous story. And if you were looking for to put a program together about mountains, apart from the wonderful stories that we've heard this evening, there is another one for you to consider, but you don't have to make yourself a mountain if you don't want to. But I had certainly had great fun channeling my inner artist, as it were, to do so. So thank you very much, everybody. Bye now.
Thanks for hosting it, Roger. It was great. Thank you.